So this was an autoethnography study. It kind of ended up being a practice run for when I do interviews for my dissertation. But I got really involved with the theoretical frameworks and the capital theory and kind of wrapping my head around all this. And it got pretty weird for a little bit. So, no, you really don't. Anyway, it's about the trajectory and how capital influences musician directories. So trigger warning before we get started. This is relatively dense and somber and kind of intense. Like, it's nothing to be worried about, but here are some pictures of my happy dogs. Look how happy.
Wait, how many dogs do you have?
Two. Yeah. Okay. So looking at the methods and the frameworks, again, this was a qualitative study. The purpose was to reflexively explore and describe musician experiences, like I said, as it relates to the sociological concept of capital. I tried to provide rich descriptions and tried to target certain data for analysis because, I mean, there's an endless supply of story in my head, and I had to really bottleneck what I thought was the most relevant to what I'm trying to study here. So it's really helped me with like looking through lenses and being able to do that. It's kind of like morphed into my life, and I don't know, it's a little bit, mentally weird, but and then to get some preliminary themes about what I'm going to be interviewing people with in the future. Again, this was like a pilot study. The only participant was me. This was kind of a purposeful convenience, very convenient, and theoretical and unique sample. I am lower SES, lower socio-emotional capital, which are, we'll get into what those are. I'm a first generation student. All of the things that I'm kind of studying, I kind of fit most of them, or a lot of them. So that made me a purposeful participant. I was very careful about establishing validity and trustworthiness. And the ways that you do that, apparently in autoethnography, are mainly through rich description, verisimilitude, so making it like plausible, like you guys don't think I'm telling a lie or anything, like I saw Sasquatch or something like that. And auditing all of my materials. I actually triangulated a lot of materials, going through old pictures, as you can see in my things here. Again, shooting for resonance and taking that social constructivist lens, which is our society and our relationships are kind of constructed by the present moment. Again, it gets kind of esoteric and weird. But anyway, the lenses that I looked through were capital and relational theories, and I'm going to talk a lot about what those are, more so than like my personal life story, which is in the paper. So I looked at economic capital, social capital, and cultural capital, which are the main forms of capital, and then what I'm calling socio-emotional capital, which is kind of all of the other ones that happen throughout the day. And then the relational theories, which we'll get into, are concerted cultivation, self-determination, and future orientation theories. So I have a lot of like models and things like that kind of help visualize the theories. So the first one is the capital theory. Again, social, cultural, and economic are the main ones, and all of these capitals kind of combine throughout every single day to form what's called a habitus, and that generates kind of advantages or disadvantages for certain people as they go through their lives, depending on their social cultural context and a bunch of other considerations. But so this is like a field of power. Again, this is from Bourdieu. I'm very heavily influenced with Bourdieu in all of this project. It just talks about how having less finances but more cultural capital puts you in this elite group of like musicians, so like celebrity musicians and things like that. And then I thought this one was really interesting and kind of funny. This is kind of like a continuum of positive and negative economic capital. So fast food is down here with not a lot of economic capital and not a lot of cultural capital that would be considered fast food. A lot of economic capital and a lot of cultural capital would be considered these things over here. I don't even know what this is, but so it's kind of like this continuum, and all of these different aspects kind of combine, which is this little morph thing here. These are kind of what I thought based on my study, what my levels of each one of these capitals, social capital, cultural capital, symbolic, were. So that's kind of an overview of what that means. And then I was looking at what's called concerted cultivation, which is kind of, it's related to capital in that it's a continuous thing where you're growing up with certain, proclivities through your parents, through your family, through your mentors, through your backgrounds. And these can kind of end up stratifying people, giving them different ways of going about life or ways of talking to people, particularly like people in authority. It teaches you how to interact with people in authority, and that comes again from your social cultural background. And this is all subconscious and internalized. Like they ask people directly, and they have literally no idea that this is happening because it just becomes part of your subconscious. I looked at self-determination theory. Well, I don't want to take too much time with this stuff, but it goes from being completely amotivated and feeling like you have basically no control over your life over to I have complete control of my life. And I kind of analyzed my life in this framework too. Much of my adult life was on this left-hand side here, which was less motivated. And then I get fleeting glimpses of this ultimate right side over here. So again, I'm going to kind of move through these a little bit quickly because these last two are kind of related. This is called future orientation theory. Now, when you have a certain self-determination, this turns into your orientation of what is possible for your future. This is very like theoretical and like what's the word? Not cognitive, but cerebral. But like it makes sense, you know, when you think about it. It's just a lot to read, especially when you're reading Bourdieu. So the future and orientation is this thing in the center here. It's a mixture of your expectations, your planning, and your aspirations, and this is influenced down here by your personal competencies, and then I think it's mediated by those, and then it's moderated by opportunities and constraints that you encounter macro at the meso and the micro level. So you know, unemployment, financial aid, and it's a constant process. So if you, what was the there was a really good example I was reading. Like if you want to be an athlete or something, and you really want to be I don't know, a basketball player, but you're really short and you can't jump that high, you know, that's going to change your future orientation. That's a pretty bad example, but it's going to give you certain like, okay, the framework of that is very not possible, not as possible anyway. And that's going to change how you go about deciding what you do. So in terms of my own life story, this is kind of what I found. I took a look at my weekly hours of what I'm doing, and this is most of what I'm doing most of the time. And this kind of, again, these kinds of time constraints are different for different people, and they have different effects on how you go about your life and what your habitus ends up being, and your levels of capital, how you interact with people, what your mental state is, what your emotional state is, what all of those things are. And through my reflexive analysis, I found out that these were the lower side of my spectrum. So I have lower social capital, emotional capital, future orientation, and concerted cultivation. But I have a relatively high self-determination, personally, not from the outside, which is more the future orientation. I'm pretty good with cultural production. I'm very productive, and my cultural capital and human capital are high, again, because I'm productive and I'm a doctoral student, so that puts me at a relatively higher level of those. I found some themes that I'm kind of toying with, and a lot of these were actually related to the narrative study that I did when I kind of explored the same thing with another person. But I have noticed that social cultural capital is more important than cultural production. So if you're like releasing albums, doing really, really phenomenal work, like even if you're doing the most amazing work in the world, if you don't know the right people to be able to get that into the world, it doesn't matter as much. I can't say that, but you know what I mean. So in my own life, whenever it was the choice between an economic decision or like a socio-emotional decision or my future orientation, like the potential risk, that always gave me more pause or hesitation than like physically lacking the money to do something, which also does happen. And then the bulk of my current substantial projects are on hold because I don't have the proper kinds of capital, and I feel like that would be too much of a risk, and I don't want to waste the time doing something if it's not done the correct way. So that's kind of how it like moves through your life. How I might be able to personally improve each kind of capital or by getting my PhD is pretty direct. Getting any kind of awards or celebrity pictures, which I am really kicking myself because I have met a lot of celebrities, played with a lot of and like I just didn't have that. It's a mixture between self-determination and future orientation to like approach, get a picture, ask for that. Like I'm not taught that that's acceptable behavior for me to do, so I didn't end up doing that. And now all I have. Well, we'll get to that in a second. I can practice more to improve my human capital or study more or research more. I can improve my work-life balance, my sense of stability in a lot of different areas, including healing. And I can reach out more to you all, to my old friends, to people that I know. And what a very dear friend of mine said was that it's all about the hang. So you really need to get out into the world and go into like the wind tunnel of activity. So I was talking about celebrity pictures, and I was looking through all of my things trying to find like one. I know I have to have one of me like on a stage with a famous person, but I don't. So this is like the best that I kind of have. This is the director of the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra, and he did like a side group, and this is me playing behind him right here. This is one of the leading ORF educators in the country right here. This is the production project that I said was on hold because, again, I can't afford the money to do it. This was an experiment that I did with an album that I released, and I did like a social experiment when I went online and went into like Reddit communities and things like that and advertised there to try to get on the top of a chart, like an online chart, and it actually worked. So it kind of gives you an idea of how impactful that kind of social capital can be. This is I don't have a picture with Maria Schneider, but I have a note that she wrote me when I played on one of her things at a university concert. These are a bunch of my albums. I got the low-key flex going on. So anyway, this is just all me. So what does this all mean to me? Anyway, this is kind of what I came up with at the end. I'm going to be trying to use my late aunt, who passed away last year, unfortunately. Her philosophy on life is like more spiritual, so like things happen for a reason, kind of thing, you know. She tries to stay optimistic, but she's a very pessimistic person. But anyway, so I'm sorry. This was a really tough project for me this semester, but anyway, the reason I have these two, what I really want to talk about is these two bugs down here. There were I lived in a lot of places that had termites and like roaches, and I actually there's a roach problem in my building right now. But so I'm trying to take my aunt's philosophy on that, in that it actually means like it comes to you telling you something. You know, it's like a superstition really. But real strength lies in your ability to stay afloat in deep waters, and the termite is telling you share your ideas with others and be willing to collaborate. And all of these, like, that's all positive and really great. But again, like, I don't know, is that really going to affect all that much? Anyway, the conclusion is this is kind of BS. And like, if I had a different level of certain kinds of capitals, I feel like I would have been in a different position. Like, my car just broke down a couple weeks ago, and like that kind of thing really knocks you off guard if you're not ready for it sometimes. Okay, anyway, the implications here are that these stratifying levels of capital are influencing and actually they kind of run the industry right now, I think, both professionally and educationally. And I think it'd be really good for musicians in general. I kind of talked about this last year in a couple of my projects, but like responding to each other's levels of SES and SEC, like recognizing when somebody needs help in a certain kind of way, and just like offering that, building those communities, because we're gonna see each other after we all graduate. You know what I mean? And then music field agents within the field should be reflexively examining it from within that field, because a lot of the research that I find is like sociologists or psychologists. I didn't find much of this in the music journals. This is all from psychology and things like that. But they're very interested in musicians, but there's not a lot of musicians that are doing it like from being that, or music educators for that matter. So I think those are the important things to come away with this, and this was kind of my practice run on how I'm going to be doing this for my dissertation. So that was it. Thank you.
Do you have questions or anything?
Yeah, well, it was like a college thing, but yeah. So. Yeah, she's great.
I just think, like, in the fourth page, like, when you're explaining, like, the capital, it was very interesting to see, like, for the lower section, like, fast food is, that's so opposite to where I'm from.
Oh, yeah.
Only the wealthy goes to fast food.
Really?
It's very expensive.
So it is very cultural then.
It's, yeah. My brother's wife, she, like, one time turned around and said, like, do you remember when we used to go to America? My brother and I, he turned to me and was like,
oh, really?
So we, and that kind of like pinpoint, because she comes from a different background, and definitely pinpoint her to a different reality. So I just remember that moment, and then I see that, I was like,
yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. I should have mentioned, actually, this is all from a Western, like, capitalist context, but that's in the paper. I didn't get into that, but yeah, that is interesting. I also think it's interesting, like, if you look on the high cultural capital but low, like, it costs not a lot. It's like do yourself coffee, stuff like that. Like those things have like an implication, but they don't actually cost a lot. It's not like financially, what's the word? Fancy? I don't know. I can't think of the word. My brain is fried. But yeah.
I think this is such great work, and it's really exciting for you to bring this line of research into music. It sounds like you might be one of the first people.
Something close, yeah.
And it's going to be just really exciting. And I was just curious. I also think it's really cool that you have the guts to like study yourself and share about that. And I was just curious a little bit about what you're planning for your dissertation. Are you going to have other people, or also
Yeah. No. I'm not trying to put this in the. I mean, it might be in the dissertation.
This was like a practice round of how you might work with other people?
Yes, it was largely convenience. And actually, looking back, it was a good thing because I don't need IRB to do this. And the only thing that might have gotten in my way was like keeping identities from like telling relational stories. But I was very, very careful about that, and I think I did a pretty good job about making it like not obvious what I'm talking about most of the time. So, but for my dissertation, I'm planning on doing at least a few music educators, musicians, and actually Dr. Walter's trying to convince me to do faculty, but I don't know how to feel about that, so, yeah.
What, if anything, was difficult about conducting this study? Anything out of pocket?
I mean, besides like the existential crises, like, yeah, it was hard to focus the scope of what I was like trying to think about. Like the epiphany, you go by what's called epiphanies. They're like important to your life moments. And so those kind of came pretty quick at first, and then they kind of trailed off, and then they started kind of coming back when I was like during my life, So it like made me very analytical of a lot of like situations that I found myself in and whatever. But finding out how to be very valid and like making this a real study was difficult at first, but then I kind of like found the rabbit hole, and I was like, okay, this is pretty straightforward. And then just going through all old stuff because I've had it's been pretty rough. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.